Great. Well, good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are. I'm John Unsworth. I'm the University Librarian and Dean of Libraries at the University of Virginia. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to the Future of American Political Cartoons, a symposium in honor of Pat Oliphant, which begins with tonight's keynote by Keith Knight. Before I introduce Keith, I'd like to say a few words about how this symposium came to be and to thank a few people, and I'd like to begin with Pat Oliphant. We were honored here at UVA when Pat chose us as the recipient of his archive, which contains watercolors, prints, sculptures, correspondence, photographs, professional papers, scrapbooks, recordings, and more than 7,000 drawings. Given Pat's status in the field and his importance to the medium, this wealth of material from his unparalleled career of more than 60 years makes it the definitive archive of its kind. Over Pat's career, political cartoons changed, not only in how they're created and distributed, but also in how cartoonists approach their subjects. And of course, the medium and the business has continued to change in recent years. Pat was one of the first artists in the field to strike out on his own, unaffiliated with a newspaper. He was able to do this because of his great talent, of course, but now it's commonplace for cartoonists to have to do this because the industry has been turned upside down, much print media has moved online, and many newspapers simply aren't keeping cartoonists on staff. This symposium was prompted by Patrick's interest in the genre of the political cartoon and its future. We had originally planned for this to be in person last spring to coincide with a major exhibition that was mounted to celebrate the Oliphant archive and Pat's career. But with the pandemic, it was delayed and then it moved online, and here we are. The silver lining is that people from all over are able to attend virtually. And I know that many of you are also signed up to attend one or more of tomorrow's panels covering freedom of expression, drawing for a polarized public, and the extinction revolution of the medium. Thank you all for your interest and for taking time to attend, and thank you in advance to our many panelists from the world of political cartooning. I also need to thank the staff behind the scenes in the library who've worked so hard to make this symposium possible, particularly Molly Schwartzburg of our Special Collections Department, who curated the Oliphant exhibition and has been a driving force in organizing this symposium. We also owe a debt to University Professor Beth Turner of the Art Department, co-curator of the exhibition, who introduced us to Pat and Susan Oliphant several years ago now. And of course, a special thanks to Pat and Susan Oliphant themselves for bringing the archive to UVA and for making this symposium possible. We're honored to have Pat joining us tonight. Pat, can you turn on your camera and give us a wave or a hello? It's great to see you here. Finally, I'd like to recognize and thank UVA Arts for sponsoring this symposium through an Arts Endowment grant. Without the help of grants and other philanthropy, we simply wouldn't be able to offer this sort of programming free of charge. If you're so moved, you can contribute to the library or to future programming such as this online through www.library.virginia.edu/give. Our keynote speaker tonight is Keith Knight, a great political cartoonist in his own right and a worthy successor to Oliphant in the way that he skewers the privileged and powerful, ridicules things that in reality are not at all funny, and can express complex ideas in a single panel. His work is, I hope, an indicator of what the future of American political cartoons will look like. Knight is the creator of 3 popular comics, 2 strips, The Nightlife and The K Chronicles, and 1 single panel cartoon called Think. His work mixes humor, satire, politics, and race, and his art has appeared in a range of publications, including the Washington Post, the Daily Kos, the San Francisco Chronicle, Medium.com, Ebony, ESPN, the magazine, LA Weekly, Mad Magazine, and the Funny Times. He's also won many art awards for cartooning, including the Comic-Con Inkpot Award for Career Achievement in Comics, and the Harvey Award for Best Comic Strip. He is also a repeat winner of the Glyph Award for the best in comics made by, for, and about people of color. Knight's K Chronicles won the Glyph Award for Best Comic Strip in 2006, 2007, 2008, 2010, and 2011. Jeremy Love who won for Bayou in 2009, must have felt like Paul Simon winning the best album at the 1976 Grammys when he thanked Stevie Wonder for not putting out an album that year. Keith is also the creator of the current Hulu series, Woke, about an African-American cartoonist, which is based in part on his own experience with race in America. If you haven't yet watched Woke, you really should. It's not only funny, it also has a great cast, including the voiceover cast, a terrific soundtrack, including music from Marginal Prophets, a hip-hop group of which Keith is a member. And it's beautifully filmed and remarkably imaginative, mixing cartooning and live action in the same frames. More about all of Keith's work is at kchronicles.com. Go have a look and buy a book, since we can't have a signing at this event. When we first approached Keith about this symposium back in January, he was very enthusiastic about coming to Charlottesville, meeting Patrick, and giving this talk. But even when the opportunity to be here in person was no longer possible, his enthusiasm never waned. We're very grateful to have Keith Knight with us here to give this symposium's keynote address, Red, White, Black, and Blue, highlighting America's racial illiteracy. Please drop your questions in the Q&A box and upvote the questions you like. Keith, the Zoom is all yours.
I just want to say thank you to everybody, especially Pat, for making this possible. And I am just so excited to be a part of this. I consider myself one of the new school political cartoonists, meaning we always had to scramble. We never had a regular gig. We always have to look and scramble all over the place. And I had an inkling of what was to come when I went to my first AAEC, which I think was in DC when I went. And I was so excited to talk to all these cartoonists, all these editorial cartoonists who were just, my heroes. And when I went into the lobby, I just remember a few people coming up to me and going, Keith, how do you do what you do? Because like my regular gig has just been, has been axed. I've been axed. So like, how do you manage it? And when everybody started asking me how to do it, I was like, oh no, we might be in trouble. So it's a new world. And sadly, like it seems to be this where we're not valued as much as we need to be, because editorial cartoonists speak truth to power in a way that I don't think any other folks do. We are the modern day court jesters, and our stuff is so important. And so I'm just really humbled to be a part of this. And let's get to it, shall we? One of the ways that I sort of figured out how to get my work out there was to, instead of trying to get people to come to newspapers, I decided to try to bring my comics to the people, and that's through these slideshows. I just found that if I wanted to reach anybody under the age of 40, it was to get onto college campuses. And so I started doing slideshows probably in about the year 1999. And one of the first slideshows I did was at Chapel Hill in North Carolina. And I just remember it was my first time going to the South. I had been to Disney World and I'd been to New Orleans, which is its own world in and of itself. But this was like, oh, I'm going to the South. Oh no, the South. And I came here and I just had this incredible time. And it was like, oh my goodness, if I ever get married and have kids, I could live here. And here it is, 20 years later, and I'm here in Chapel Hill. And but that was the first time I did the slideshow outside of the Bay Area. And I just saw how showing these cartoons, it's not that everybody loves cartoons. Everybody loves what we do. We just have to get it in front of people. And the internet may have hurt newspapers a whole lot, but the internet's opened up all these opportunities, including doing these Zoom presentations. But I think nothing beats one-on-one conversation with people. So in lieu of that, I was so looking forward to come to Charlottesville. Our dentist is there in Charlottesville, actually. And I hope the exhibit's still around when we come up in a couple of weeks. But in lieu of that, I do these presentations on Zoom and I do them live to interact with people and have great discussions after. So I hope you stick around after the presentation so we can have some discussion. Again, this is called Red, White, Black, and Blue, highlighting America's racial illiteracy. So let me share the screen. Am I allowed to do that? No. Could you allow me to share the screen so I can get my slideshow up? Here we go. All right, here we go. Yeah, so that's my logo. Since Tying the Knot a year and a half ago, a lot of readers have been asking me this question. Has this once macho he-master gone all soft now that I'm a married man? The answer is yes, I've gone all soft, soft and supple. It's true, the best thing about getting hitched is being able to use all your wife's girly products in the bathroom. Stuff I wouldn't be caught dead buying in public. Okay, let's see, we've got some anti-crab ointment, anal wart remover, and a peach smell the loofah scrub. Shh, not so loud with the loofah scrub. That's right, people. No more scrubbing the nether regions with lava soap for me. We've got rosemary and aloe vera and eucalyptus leaves infused with hibiscus shampoo, organic sea kelp and lamb semen exfoliating wash, colloidal oatmeal, and placenta enema. Honestly, y'all, using this stuff does make a difference. A lot of folks have been noticing. Gee, your skin feels terrific. So this is what I do. This is the K Chronicles. It's my semi-autobiographical comic strip that I've been doing for 28 years now. And it essentially is, I take something that happens to me in my life and then I just do a sort of rant on it and generally have a twist at the end. And it's worked for me for a while. So just a little bit about me. I grew up in Boston, and this is a picture from Boston from when I was growing up in the 70s. This is essentially, I think it's a metaphor for the United States, but it's also a metaphor for Boston, which is a bunch of white people, one dude with the American flag, and he's about to stab a black man who's in the suit right there. And I don't know if you know anything about this picture, but it's about the busing controversies in Boston when they were trying to bus black kids to white schools, and folks didn't like it. And this guy in the suit, the black man, is a lawyer. But this is the sort of shadow of where I grew up. And I never had a black teacher in school from kindergarten to 12th grade. And I just recently did a strip a couple of years ago about the effect of having a black teacher on black students. They said if a black student has one black teacher, just one, the likelihood of them going to college goes up about 30 to 35%. And that's pretty huge. Now, I was lucky enough to have a substitute that was black, but not only was he black, he was an aspiring cartoonist, and he would let me bring my chair up. He would put on a study class, but he'd let me bring my chair up to his desk, and I could doodle along with him. And just seeing that he existed made me say that I could be a cartoonist. I could do it. So I didn't have my first official teacher, black teacher, until I was a junior in college. And he was an American literature teacher. And that American literature teacher assigned us writers like Ralph Ellison, Richard Wright, Maya Angelou, and James Baldwin. And when someone brought up the idea, like, why are you giving us all black writers? He just said, I'm giving you all American writers. And when he said that, my mind totally exploded, because we are taught so much that American literature is Mark Twain, like Walden Pond, you know? You just, and here was a guy who was working within the system, but he was subverting the system by turning a bunch of people on to some of the best writing that America has to offer. And so not only did the class blow my mind, it changed what I was doing with my comics. So I was doing autobiographical comics in college, but it went from just doing comics about keg parties to doing comics about what it's like to be a Black man growing up in America. And so it really affected me in a really deep way. Here's some of my favorite ones. This is dedicated to that one Black kid, The Cave Chronicles by Keith Knight. This is dedicated to that one Black kid who lives in that tiny ass town off the highway in the middle of nowhere. This is dedicated to that one Black kid who was not into hip hop in high school. Black Sabbath's not Black, you know. This is dedicated to that one Black kid who gets used as the reason why someone isn't a racist. I can't be prejudiced. My mom invited one to my 13th birthday party. This is dedicated to that one Black kid with hair people want to touch all the time. Back off. Is it like a Brillo, Pat? This is dedicated to that one Black kid who gets told they're not really Black. Yo, man, brothers don't do what you do. Hey, it's a compliment coming from me. This is dedicated to that one Black kid who always gets asked by white folks why they can't use the N-word. Why ask me? I don't use it, but you could if you wanted to. This is dedicated to that one Black kid who wonders if they measure up to the myth. This is dedicated to this one Black kid. So this is like basically Black people bingo. I sell a lot of these prints at Comic Cons, and they'll read it and they'll go, oh, yep, that's me. Yep, that's me. That's me. And then you just cross it like that. But this translates to anything. It could be that one Latino kid, that one gay kid, that one disabled kid. And we all have that experience of not fitting into a box, but also the experience of microaggressions, whether on one side of it, receiving it or giving it. And so this is the type of thing I try to highlight in some of the best of my work. And this is really, I was part of the Afropunk festival this afternoon. I was interviewed. And if you ever have a chance to see the Afropunk movie, it's all about just being that one Black kid at a punk show, which I've been there. And it is this one Black kid in a movie. It's amazing. It always amazes me the way people react when they first enter my bedroom. Holy smokes, what the hell are you doing with that blow-up doll? Folks are often surprised to find a Feel Me Up Wilbur doll in my bedroom, although I don't know why. Tickle Me Elmo may be the #1 doll for America as a whole, but Feel Me Up Wilbur has been selling like hotcakes in the Black community. They come in quite handy, although not for the use the manufacturer had originally intended. And he's saying, taxi, and he's thinking, Black man equals stabbed in back, off duty, off duty. But wait, look, Black man plus white guy equals okie dokie. Get the hell in here, boys. You see, because 5 Black men standing on a corner without Wilbur is a gang. But 5 Black men standing on a corner with Wilbur is a basketball team with a coach. They're banned in Boston, so I bought a few to send to my friends back east. Oh my God, look, it's Hootie and the Blowfish. So this happened to me when I was in San Francisco and I was waiting for a taxi, and of course nothing was happening. And then a white coworker of mine walked up to me and started talking to me, and then cab stopped really easily, really quickly. And I was like, oh man, if I could carry you around in my pocket. And then she called the police on me. Not really, that didn't happen. Anyway, so in 1999, I launched my second strip. It was called Think. And instead of doing a multi-panel autobiographical strip, I wanted to do a single panel, and I wanted to take it from the news. And I didn't realize until 15 years in that the word think is actually night spelled backwards without the G. And I also noticed that this logo gives me warm fuzzies because it looks like Charles Schultz's Snoopy in a way that I could never actually draw Snoopy, but for some reason this logo looks like Snoopy, the dot and the eye, and then the parentheses for the ear. So it has this like warm, fuzzy quality to me to when I see it, which is very interesting. Anyway, what I like about Think is these single panels, when you get these ideas and you can't flesh them into K Chronicles, like longer things. I love these sort of quick shots, so I'm going to run through them. Denny's serving black since 1997, if signs told the truth. Your sister had the baby, it's a boy. The exact moment radical black activist Thomas X realized that, yes, indeed, he was an Uncle Tom. What was promised? 40 acres and a mule. What was got? 40 ounces in a pit bull. This just in, police have just released a description of the alleged gunman who's been terrorizing the downtown area. Please don't let it be a black guy. Please don't let it be a Middle Eastern guy. Ha, they'll never catch me. Ah, the power of white privilege. A screening for women only, that's discrimination. I demand entry. Hey, Louise, we got another snowflake wanted to get a pap smear. Send him in. The penis monologues with Wilt Chamberlain, Jimi Hendrix, and Milton Berle. How was it? Way, way too long. That's for some of you older folks out there. You're doing this because I'm black, aren't you? Oh, now see, why do you always have to play the race card? Ah, the race card. The race card, what about black on black crime? Get over it. It was a long time ago. Things like this are what white people say when they don't want to talk about what I think is the largest problem we have in America, and that's its race problem. And for far too long, the discussion of race in America goes only as far as when white people feel uncomfortable, which is about 5.2 seconds. We need to get past that 5.2 seconds and have a real discussion about race. For far too long, the discussion has gone like this. One day at EO gallery opening, frankly, I don't care if a person is black, white, green, purple, or brown. Me too. Who the heck are all these green and purple folks white people are always talking about? The K Chronicles by Keith Knight. I'm sorry, I consider myself relatively open-minded, but I have to draw the line at purple people. I know this ain't PC, but purple people are nothing but barely civilized knuckle draggers. Believe me, I know. I sat next to one in second grade. When I was growing up, a purple family moved in next door, and the whole neighborhood started to smell like Fig Newtons. And I swear this one guy was hired at my job just because he was, well, you know. I heard green folks have 3 nipples. I think I'd better be going. Me too. Be careful walking back to your car. The purple people might get you. So yeah, if unless Avatar is a documentary, there are no blue people. There are no green people, and there are no purple people. And unless we start having discussions that are based in reality, we can never, ever move forward. So everything's always crazily dismissed. And it's like, I don't know, the idea of black on black crime drives me crazy. People rob and hassle and do bad things to people that they are around. Okay, so black people are around black people, white people are around. Like white people do crime to white people. And it's like, you never hear about white on white crime. It's almost the same percentage. And I don't know what the point is, but what about black on black crime? Do you want black people to start robbing other races of people? Is that the point? So these little things that people say are bizarre excuses that I have lots of problems with. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. So in 2008, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I launched a daily comic strip. Now, I'm not saying that launching a daily comic strip was such a bad thing, but 2008 was the worst year in the newspaper industry's history. That's when the bottom fell out of another Republican-led tax cuts for the rich thing. And those taxes came home to roost. And everything went down the tubes. But I had a kid, and I had to up my income somehow, some way, even if it was a little tiny bit. So I started doing 9 deadlines a week. But because of that, I amassed a large amount of work. And I'm super excited about it because whereas the K Chronicles was the diary comic strip, it was kind of like whatever was on my mind. And it was all about me, me, me. Think was from the news, a socio-political strip. The great thing about the format for the daily is you want to emphasize character, and it's the type of thing where people just want to open the paper and they want to check in on the characters every day. And so I took what I had in the K Chronicles and then developed my wife as a character, my old roommates, and Clovis and Gunther in the strip, and then a few other characters. And it was really fun. I'm just going to show you a few of my favorite ones in this. Do you think extraterrestrials are racist? Why do you ask? They never abduct people of color. It's easier to catch white people at night. So what I love about my readers is they're very intelligent, and they send me all this stuff whenever I am wrong about something. And so they sent newspaper clippings after this strip ran about the first couple that got abducted by aliens. And they were a mixed race couple. There was a black husband and a white wife. But I always say they got caught because of the white wife. Anyway, this next one is like, I got the most amount of letters out of everything. Vet mentoring. A guy in my unit smothered an IED, took one for the team. When I got home, I went to tell his loved ones what kind of sacrifice he made. Turns out he was gay. I was the first one to let his partner know what happened. I've shared things with soldiers that I'd never tell family and friends. War does that. Here was a guy who gave his life for his fellow soldiers, but wasn't allowed to share with us who was waiting for him back home. If we're not fighting for this soldier's freedom, then what are we fighting for? So I did this because I just wanted to talk about don't ask, don't tell, and how silly a rule or a law, or whatever it is. And I don't know if you remember Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but it was about you could be gay in the military, but you can't tell anybody that you're gay. So if anyone asks you like, oh, do you have family? Do you have kids? You have to lie. You have to lie to these people that you're depending on your life with, and you have to deceive and lie, otherwise you get kicked out. So I just want to write about how silly it was. And the reason why it's in color is it's a Sunday strip, and the strip runs in Sundays. It ran on Sundays in the Washington Post. I think it ran in the San Francisco Chronicle, it ran in Boston, it ran in San Diego. And after this strip ran, I started getting all these letters from military people, all these emails. And I was like, this is weird. I opened it up and they all said, you just changed my mind on Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And I was like, wow, that's really, and I kept on reading them. It's like, thank you for explaining Don't Ask, Don't Tell to me and why it's so silly. And so like in our ideal world as an editorial cartoonist, you hope that that your work would change people's minds on something. And here was this evidence. I got like about 22 letters about it. And I told you that my strip runs in San Diego Union Tribune, but it also runs in the Washington Post. So this is the last decent president that we have in the Oval Office. And on his desk is the Sunday Comics. Now, my strip ran in June of that year. And in October of that year, President Obama repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Now, I'm not saying I had anything to do with it, but the evidence is right there. It's right there on his desk. What I'm saying is comics can change the world. They can. We just have to get people to read them. But yeah, so I was really sort of psyched and empowered by just that moment. And in 2015, I was commenting on Ferguson and what was going on with the killing of Mike Brown. And I was extremely frustrated because I'd been doing all these comics about police brutality for, I don't know, like at least a decade, over a decade. And I came across this picture of this young lady, and she just encapsulated my feelings at the time. Like, I cannot believe I still have to protest this. And just the look on her face. And I was just like, man, like, you know what I'm gonna do? Because so many people were going, why is this happening now? It's because we have a Black president. This is why? And I just wanted to explain to people that this has gone on forever. And so I put together, they shoot Black people, don't they? 20 years of police brutality cartoons. So I basically collected cartoons that I've been doing for the past 20 years and put them in a slideshow, and then just went on the road with it and went around to a bunch of different universities and colleges and just talked about, you know, this has been going on forever. And the only reason why you're seeing it now is people have cell phones. And so these cell phones, like, you know, I mean, the people who are complaining about it obviously are white people. And because they're now, you could record it on cell phones, they're seeing it for the first time. But I just was trying to explain to people that this is the history of police in this country. It's basically what their job is. Anyway, this is police officer application question number 6. What do you see in this picture? Sons, brothers, fathers, human beings, or target practice? Mr. White Police Officer, how many shots does it take for 4 white officers to defend themselves against one unarmed black male? A black male, well, let's see. Blam, 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 blam. 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 Now, if you notice, the figure in the corner is looking at her watch. That is a trope that cartoonists use to make it feel like a lot of time is going by. Blam, 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 blam. Blam, 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 blam. Oh, sorry, 41. Don't you think that was a little excessive? Listen, you people could avoid getting into these situations if you would just lighten up. So I did this after Amadou Diallo, an immigrant in New York, was shot at 41 times by police when he was going for his ID in his pocket in the hallway of his apartment building. And when the police officers went on trial, they took the trial and moved it to the whitest part of New York State. And then they got off for defending, they said they were defending themselves. And so with this strip, I just wanted to say, like, at what point does it go? How many shots does it take for it to go from defense to offense? Is it 10? Is it 20? Is it 30 or 40? Like, how could this be construed as defense? And so I just think that what I think I'm trying to explain is systemic racism. Systemic racism is not a car driving by and a bunch of teenagers yelling the N-word at me, you know, driving by. That's the racism that most people know, and they think that's horrible. That's horrible. What's more horrible is a system in place that allows for officers to murder a Black man. And the system will save them. The system is designed to protect them. And the system is designed to disparage the victim. That's systemic racism. And that's, we can have, you can put all the Black Lives Matter avatars up all you want. But if we don't move to dismantle systemic racism, then nothing is being accomplished. And this is a firing range where police officers do target practice. How come all the targets are Black? What do you mean? They're silhouettes. They're supposed to be Black. I'm talking about the afro and the FUBU logo across the chest. Well, I'll be. So this on the silhouette there, that in his hand is a basketball. Some people have misconstrued it as a watermelon, and it can work either way. So anyway, this ran in 2009, and in 2013, there was a Black female soldier in Florida. Always happens in Florida. She wanted to do target practice at her local police precinct, and they said, "Sure, come on down, a soldier. Thank you for your service." So she goes there, and she goes into the place where they do target practice, and 4 targets up on the wall were Black and white photographs of young Black male teenagers. And one of them was her brother, a picture of her brother as a teenager. And when the police chief was asked by the press, like, you know, WTF, he said, "What we're doing is not illegal." That was it. He just said, "What we're doing is not illegal." So it's like, it's completely absurd. You may think that it's just a couple of bad apples, but what it is a complete culture that does not value Black life at all. And let me explain where police officers came from. Police came from, they grew out of the slave patrols of the past. Slave patrols were poor whites that were hired to keep the Black population in check, the slave population in check. So if slaves try to escape, there would be rewards put out, and these folks would be deputized to go and try to find them. And this didn't just happen in the South. The record of the first slave patrol was actually Charleston, Massachusetts. Even when I was growing up, Charlestown was like known as a place where if you were Black, you didn't go anywhere near it. And I hear it's now gentrified, and there's plenty of Black folks there. But I mean, the fact that in the 70s, you still didn't want to go there is pretty absurd. A cruel joke to play on a Black jogger. Thief. And then the cops show up. So what's so crazy about this is this ran in Charleston, South Carolina, and my editor called me and she said, we're getting all these complaints about your comic this week. And I said, well, what happened? And she said, well, people are calling up and going, I am a white person. And white people always identify themselves when it has to do with this race stuff. I am a white person, and even I find this racist against Black people. And so I said, are they all saying that? She said, yeah. I said, as far as you know, were any Black people calling up? And she said, no. And I said, do you want to know why? And she said, yes. And I said, because Black people would not look at this and say this is racist. They would say that this comic is depicting something that is very racist. And she says, well, okay, so what do you want me to say to those people who are calling and complaining? And I said, you say to the people, if you could complain as much about the real life incidents of police brutality as much as you are this comic strip, then maybe some change might actually happen. And then I think I got dropped by the paper soon after. But I'm not only a member, but I am also a client. 10 years into living in San Francisco, I was hanging up a poster for my band at a bus stop in San Francisco in a Richmond district. And a police car pulled up across traffic, and a cop jumps out. He's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I am hanging up posters for my band, and I have a black stapler, and I'm going to put it down on the ground." And so he gets on the radio and he says, "We found the suspect." And I said, "What are you talking about? What suspect?" He said, "You fit the description of someone who has been robbing houses in the area." And I said, "What's the description?" And he said, 6 foot tall, black male. That's all he said. He didn't say anything else. 6 foot tall, black male, which means he could stop any black person on the street at any time. Now, keep in mind, at this time, I had these crazy dreads that made me look like a black sideshow Bob. And I say that honestly, like that's how I describe, like if you saw me robbing a house, you would say a black sideshow Bob. Anyway, so I just like took it in and I said, wow, like I looked down the street, Arguello, there's a cop car rushing there. I look up Fulton and there's a cop car coming down that way. I look down to the beach, there's a cop car coming this way. And I said, wow, this is like that thing that I've been writing about, like doing cartoons about forever. And now it's happening to me. And I just sort of, being the cartoonist that I am, I was like just trying to observe everything and take everything in. And one thing I wanted to do was like, I'm always like on the outside looking in, trying to catch the eye of the person that's being hassled by the cops. So I thought I would look out at people driving by, trying to catch their eye. And it's amazing how frightened white people are when you're surrounded by cops and you're trying to catch people's eyes. It's really interesting. But most interesting is my white roommate was on a bus up the street on the 5 Fulton bus. And he said the bus turned and he looked down the bottom of the hill and he saw all these cop cars down there flashing. And he's like, SFPD hassling another black man. As he got closer, he saw my hair and he was like, holy shit, that's my black man. And the bus pulls across the street and then the bus takes off. And so there across the street was my roommate, my white roommate, who's not that big. He's probably about 5'5". And he starts running across the street at me and the cops. And it was like very deliberately, very angry. And he was like, what the fuck? Like he's screaming, yelling bloody hell. And he's like, get the F away from him, screaming, going nuts. And you see all the cops turn around in slow motion and see this guy coming at him. And then they were just like, take it easy, man, take it slow. And right there, like, boom, I just saw the definition of white privilege. Because if he had been black, or if he had been brown, coming across the street like that, screaming, going nuts, he would have been tased, he would have been beaten, or worse. And these cops were treating him like he was their manager. And that was the thing I took away from that. I was like, holy cow. And here's the thing, like, if something happened to me, believe me, they would have said I was a rapper. I probably had a pot in me. I would have been disparaged in the media, just another black man. And people would have been like, well, if you just follow directions, blah, 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 and it's funny because all these incidents, people just sit there and try to make excuses for the cops. Well, if you just follow the directions, we shouldn't have to be perfect to live. Again, we shouldn't have to be perfect to live. We excuse cops who supposedly get all this training, and I think it's in Florida. Like people who work in a salon actually have to have more training than cops do. So But cops are supposedly trained, supposedly, to be cool under pressure. But we have to be cool, knowing that cops can kill us at any time, and the system is designed to let them go. We are the ones who have to be cool under pressure and not make any mistake, because if we do make a mistake and we do die, then it's just like people are like, well, you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have done that. And I mean, it's crazy, it's absurd. So yeah, this happened just down the street from my house in Los Angeles. This is a police officer. This is Chips, if you're familiar with Chips. That's real Chips though. And he's throwing haymakers on a 63-year-old grandmother who is schizophrenic, and she was trying to cross the 10 freeway. And he decided to prevent her from doing it by punching her in the face. If it wasn't for the driver who stopped and filmed her, then he would have gotten away with it. So you think about how many people, how many cops get away with this stuff, and how many cops are happen to get caught. But here's what happens. He gets fired, and then he can go get a job somewhere else. Well, first he goes on paid leave. He goes on paid leave, and then he gets fired, and then he gets a job somewhere else. Here in North Carolina, if a cop is fired for abuse, it's not allowed to be public. So the cop can go somewhere else and just get hired somewhere else. And no one knows why he got fired from the last thing it was at. The police unions, for some reason, like the government hates unions, but for some reason, police unions are the most powerful unions in the world and in this country. And bad cops are protected more than good cops. I know if you ever read about cops that tell on bad cops, they get pushed out, they get shunned, they get threatened, all this, and they get run out of the job. Whereas bad cops totally like sue to get their jobs back, sue to get their pensions and all this stuff. I believe that if a cop and her family, sues and they get money from the city, taxpayer money. If families sued and the money came out of police pensions, not only the offending cop, but the partners that are there and the precinct that they're from, police would weed out all their bad cops. If it hurt them in their wallet, they would actually possibly do something about it. So people keep on saying, why you always bringing up race? You're always, it's so much. Listen, I didn't bring, it's not my fault. It's white people made it about race. It's always been about race forever. For the longest time, rich whites in the past were like, okay, so there's a lot of poor white people. We need to somehow convince them that they have it better than poor people of color. So we'll make the black people 3/5 of a human. We won't even, so they're not even human. So we'll just say to the poor people, white people, at least you're human. And that's been the same thing all the way up until today. It's always been about race. And we are all, you see it right before us. So I really believe that one of the biggest problems is we don't talk about the history of America. We don't talk about the real history of America. Everything's a fairy tale. Everything, if we knew the history of America, everything that's going on today, we'd be like, oh yeah, okay, this makes sense. This all makes sense. We decide to tell Black history as if it's not even American history. It's like this separate thing. When the country was built on the backs of Black people, we use the smallest month to tell 4 or 5 feel-good stories. And when, most of Black history in America is not a pretty history, but within that ugly history is all this amazing stuff. And I know people are going to sit there and say, oh, come on, man, don't get into it like it was such a long time ago. And I say Jesus was a long time ago. And you don't hear anybody saying, get over it. That was a long time ago. So yeah, they get offended for a second and then they think about it and they say, oh yeah, that makes sense. Anyway, so imagine this, and because we don't spend enough time on this. Let's say American slavery, 340 years. I don't know how many generations that is, but do they say generation is every what? I don't know, 14 years. I don't know how many generations is it, but it's 3 centuries. Tell me what you could build with 3 centuries of free labor. Again, what could you build with 3 centuries of free labor? And that's the thing that we don't take the time to think about. We have, we built this country on the backs of enslaved Africans. And if you didn't have to pay people anything, and if you wanted to make more, you would just rape somebody and make more and then sell them and do what, like, we don't talk enough about that. And I know, like, early on, people would always say, well, what about the Irish? They got treated badly too. And this goes to how little we learn about the slave trade. I always say to the people that say, what about the Irish? No, Irish need to apply. I say, you know, the Irish did not come across the Atlantic in the bottom of slave ships, laid down like sardines in a can, with the idea that most would not survive. People vomited and shit themselves and had babies, and babies were tossed over the side to sharks and stuff. And the ones that managed to survive, they were stripped of their names, stripped away from their families, stripped of their culture. If they tried to learn anything, they were punished severely. They were beaten. They were tortured. They had to be broken in a way that no Irish went through. And we don't take the time to understand the effects of that today. We know that the descendants of victims of the Holocaust suffer from higher amounts of depression, of suicide. So when you have 340 years of slavery and then another 89 years of Jim Crow, what effect do you think that has on people today? Again, look at this graph. It's this much of people not even being real people. And then another 100 years of oppression. And then you got affirmative action, and you got civil rights, and you got 8 years of a Black president. And people think that means everything's solved. We know that if you break something, it takes way longer to fix it. No matter what it is, it takes way longer to fix it. So if you're talking 400 years, 75 years means nothing. And we won't even acknowledge that there is even a problem. So I think people need to really think about that. So one of the neatest things is the Racial Equity Institute here in, where am I? North Carolina, said that they have this great analogy for a Monopoly game, which is, what if Black people were sitting around playing for Monopoly for 3 hours, and then white people came walking in, and the Black people were like, hey, you want to play? And they're like, well, you own all the railroads and all the properties and you have motels and hotels everywhere. And the Black people were like, I started out with $200. You're going to start out with $200. What's the problem? So that's what really, like, That's what America is, which is people sit there and go, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. The 40 acres and a mule that was promised to Black people after the Civil War never came. I was listening to an interview with a former slave from the 30s, and he said that in Texas, their former master, walked up to them and said, "Y'all are free. Get off my property or I'll start shooting." And so these folks are suddenly like, they have never known freedom ever. And this dude is kicking them off his property. And they walk into town. He said they had nowhere to go. No one would feed them. No one would house them. No one would give them work. And this happened to, I don't know how many people that happened to. We have this idea that Lincoln freed the slaves. Then suddenly white people were like, "Oh, you're human now. Come, we'll let you use schools and use everything." And we don't even take the time to understand that. And stuff like the low cost mortgages that, Blacks, you ask people, did Blacks fight in World War I or World War II? And like, if you ask certain people, they're like, "I don't even know," because you didn't learn that. Blacks went and fought in World War I, World War II, and when they came back, the government had provided low-cost loans to families to buy their first home, because we know that the part of wealth is by buying your first house and getting an education and all that stuff. They didn't offer these low-cost loans to Black folks, and they basically shepherded Black folks into the worst parts of town all across the country. And it's generally the east part of town. And that's because the wind blows that way and all the garbage and pollutants and everything is on the east side of town. So if you notice that most east whatever, Palo Alto, East Chapel Hill, east this, east that, there's usually the sewer company is there or whatever. And then there's the Black neighborhood. So while white families were able to build wealth, they were able to go to schools like UNC Chapel Hill. Blacks weren't able to do that. And they were redlined. They couldn't get loans if they were living in certain parts of town. And that perpetuated. And there's a reason now that the average amount of wealth that a white family has in the US it's probably gone down lower. It's probably 200,000 after 4 years of this BS. But for Black people, it's about $1,000. And so these things need to be taught. They need people. My mom was a sharecropper. A sharecropper was what happened, after slavery. There were sharecroppers. So they weren't slaves, but they got paid pennies a day. So they weren't slaves. But my mom said if she didn't pick enough cotton, she would be beaten. So her older sister picked cotton for her. So she had enough cotton so she wouldn't get beaten. I was listening to an interview just a few weeks ago about a guy who was going to prison for the first time, and they put him in chains, and they put him on a bus to drive 5 hours to this prison. He said the moment he got put in chains onto this bus, loaded onto this bus, squished up against all these other Black men, he felt like he was on a slave ship. What we do in America is just change the names of things. So slavery begat sharecropping, begat the prison industrial complex. We teach that white people do everything, so much so that if we have proof that white people didn't do it, white people think aliens did it. It's that absurd. I will say this. In Hollywood, they have, they'll do a thing where they'll be a diversity hire. So if a room full of writers will be a room full of white writers, and there'll be one diversity hire in that corner. And I've heard white writers literally say, "I didn't get that job because of the diversity hire. Or my nephew didn't get in because of affirmative action. It's so ingrained in people's heads that to blame the person of color when there were 11 other white people there that probably got gigs because of people they know, or they were just better than this person, or they got lucky, or whatever. But it's crazy. And we have the exact opposite like mindset because we don't learn anything. We have to learn it after we get out of school. And if you're lucky, you go to a historically Black college and they teach you all that stuff. But if you're not, like myself, you gotta go through all this stuff and discover it and be like, oh. So here's just some of the stories. Robert Smalls that I've done about Black history that we could be teaching. This guy was born a slave in South Carolina. He basically stole a Confederate ship. He dressed up as the captain, stole a Confederate ship, picked up his family on the side, and sailed it up to the Union ships. Then he went to DC, convinced President Lincoln, to use freed slaves as in the Union Army. So when they won, he went down and bought his old house. He bought his old house that he was born a slave in. And then when his master's wife got out of the sanitarium she was in, he let her sleep in her own bedroom until she died, which is unbelievable. Josephine Baker, part of the Harlem Renaissance, was this amazing singer, dancer. She couldn't take it here in the US, so she went to Paris and became a huge hit. But what was amazing about her is she spied for the French during the war. She was this totally badass spy. So there's just so many things that we could teach. Like, I don't understand why we don't teach music. I mean, obviously, because the arts are the first thing that gets cut in school. But why don't we teach rock and roll? Why don't we teach blues? Why don't we teach jazz? It's one of the greatest contributions that Black people have made to America and the world. American music is Black music. If it wasn't for Black people, all the music you'd hear on the radio is like that whistly Renaissance music that they play. So this is what we should be showing to people. This is what happened after Reconstruction, and then came the Black codes and basically oppression for a good 90 years. And it continues to this day. I don't even want to say it stopped, but this is when it was very, like, this is the original ISIS video. You know those ISIS videos? Well, we did it here first, which is lynching. We basically, white people would get together, have a picnic, and you see how happy everybody is, and they'd bring the kids, and then they would murder somebody, disembowel them, take photos, and police would allow this to happen, and then they would send them for postcards around the country. It wasn't just about the victim. It was about sending a message to the Black community that if you step out of line, we will kill you all. This is the exact same as this. This was done by a police officer who had his hand in his pocket. He saw he was being filmed, and he was looking there like, nothing's going to happen to me. And the only way you could act so nonchalantly, murdering someone on camera, is if there's a system in place that says nothing's going to happen to me. And we have a system in place that allows this guy to, I mean, he got charged for third-degree murder, which I have police in my family and they've never heard of third-degree murder. And it wasn't till stuff started getting torn up that it got switched to second-degree murder, and the other officers that were there were charged. Trayvon Martin is Emmett Till. Again, Trayvon Martin is Emmett Till. It's the same thing. It's a message that says, you can't even be, we will come for you at any time. We will pick you, we will choose you. And I know this is a big downer, but like, you have to, in order for us to move forward, we need to acknowledge that this is the truth that we live in. So I have to do a little quick thing because I kind of messed up. So we loot and riot and go nuts, right? And the thing is, nothing happens if the cop was charged immediately with murder, and fired immediately, and like if Breonna Taylor, what happened to Breonna Taylor? If the cops were fired immediately and charged with murder, instead the guy got charged because one of the bullets went into one of the apartments. 2 weeks ago, there was a thing posted where 2 officers got fired because they killed a porcupine. These are messages that say we are worthless. And this comic, I put this, people are always confused with the Donald Rumsfeld quote. He was saying this about Iraqis. And I basically took that quote and put it with the police and rioting and stuff. If stuff didn't get torn up, then they wouldn't have charged him with second-degree murder. They wouldn't have charged the officers that were there. And they're not going to get convicted. The system is designed so they won't get convicted. But because of this, because of rioting, the LAPD's funds got cut. And no one's talking about defunding the police. They're just diverting money to, mental health services and different things like that. But statues are coming down, and people always post something about Martin Luther King, and they say, oh, he did it peacefully. But this is a cartoon, an editorial cartoon from when Martin Luther King was around. And it's the same thing. When you sit there and say, oh, he was peaceful, he did it the peaceful way, then you're ignoring all the people who had to deal with police dogs, with fire hoses, with stuff being poured on their heads, being spat upon. Kids, little girls were blown up. He was stabbed. He was arrested. He was assassinated. And so I don't know if it's just like people just don't even pay attention to history or anything, but honestly, we don't get taught. We don't get taught what we should be getting taught. And here's the thing. People try to protest peacefully. People try to protest peacefully, but nothing has ever been gotten when the oppressed act like really nice. The oppressor doesn't go, oh, you know what? You're acting really nice right now, so we're going to throw something at you. Like, we're going to give you something. That never happens. The history of this country, one of the biggest sort of riots was the Tea Party. And, it was a bunch of white folks who dressed up as Native Americans, and they destroyed a bunch of product. They destroyed, and I'm sure there were some people sitting around going, so why do you got to tear up everything? Why you got to tear up everything? But like, that's the only way stuff gets done, unfortunately. And, this guy, a lot of folks didn't like what he was talking about back in the day. And now he's one of the greatest Americans, athletes ever, right? So, so the whole Black Lives Matter things, this whole all lives matter. Here's the thing with Black Lives Matter. If I have a bumper sticker on my car that says, save the rainforests, it does not mean fuck the other forests. It means the rainforests are being cut down right now, and we need to do something about it. That's what Black Lives Matter is about. And people always say, but it's a terrorist organization. It's nice to have a a propaganda machine that convinces people that Black Lives Matter. I've worked with Black Lives Matter, and like, you know, it's funny, whenever there's a protest, there's an opportunity there to make Black Lives Matter look bad. It was just discovered today in Minneapolis, the police precinct that got shot upon. It turns out that it was the Boogaloo Boys. It was like white, you know, white militia guys who wanted to show up and make everything look terrible. So they showed up and started shooting up the place. This has always been the case. With the civil rights movement, the same thing happened. And if we don't look at our past and see that we're doing the same thing over and over and over again, we'll never live up to the ideals that we supposedly have. I honestly believe that, you know, the whole American ideals thing is a big sham, but I like to think that it's something that we can strive for. And I think part of it is creating work and like this, and just protesting and educating the hell out of yourself. I think right now we value ignorance. Well, America values ignorance, and I think that needs to change. All right, so really quickly, so yeah, this is we got statues coming down. That's really wonderful and everything, but really, it's the system that needs to be taken down. That's what really needs to be taken down. You're seeing it right now, voter suppression. You just wonder, like, why are all these lines in all these poor communities, all these Black communities, all this stuff? You would think that instead of trying to suppress the vote, why don't you just give the people what they want? Or just like come up with ideas that will attract, instead of trying to take away people's vote. Like, that to me is the most un-American thing you can possibly do. And it's happening, it's happening. So this leads us to my TV show. I'm sorry, I'm almost over. So yeah, a few years ago, I moved down to Los Angeles, and I met really, like, a lot of planets had to align. And I always knew that my stuff would be developed for television, but I didn't think it would be of this high quality. I thought it would be some sleazy outfit in Las Vegas, and they wouldn't have enough money. And they said, if we put nudity in it, we could sell it overseas, and then that's what would happen. But I was lucky enough to just meet a lot of amazing people, and we put this thing together, and Lamorne Morris got involved, and Blake Anderson, and we had to shoot it in Vancouver because we couldn't afford San Francisco, but it turned out to be just a wonderful experience. This is T. Murph on the right side. He plays Clovis. Mo Marable is the director with the glasses. He's the one who said, let's not do 2D animation. Let's do puppetry. Let's do all this neat stuff. And he is just a visual genius. Blake Anderson, if you know him from Workaholics, he's always hilarious, and he's just a really good guy. And then that's Mud on the left side. But this is a very secret Easter egg. I was the koala in the 7th episode. So if you watch the show, in the 7th episode, there's a koala that steps out from the crowd and punches the character based on me. That was me. Excellent. And so this is the last comic. This is the tale of 2 viral emails. One is about a bumper sticker. The other is about a kid that looks like me. Racism in America is like that big pile of dog poop that sits on the grass in front of your apartment building. It's been there for as long as you can remember, and nobody knows how it got there. Nobody wants it there, yet no one wants to clean it up. They say, why should I? I didn't leave it there. Soon you just accept it. You do your best to avoid or ignore it. It's that pile of poop that allows someone like Trayvon Martin to be murdered while his killer walks. The flies that are attracted to that poop are the people who put don't renege bumper stickers on their vehicles. I don't care about the flies, just clean up the shit. So this is a moment in time. If you ever wondered what you would do if you were alive in the civil rights movement, now is the time to find out. Now, right now. And really, I honestly believe that this is a moment in time. It's a moment that, if you know the history of this country, it's expected. This has happened right after Reconstruction. It happened right after the Civil Rights Movement. It's when the white majority says to the black population, "Do you think you got something with your black president? We're going to show you by putting in the least qualified, most immoral human being that we can find, and all he has to do is be rich. And he's going to destroy the country." Now, I don't know why people vote against their best interest, but we are seeing the results of that right now. And if we don't flex back, I don't know where we're going to go from here. If there's another 4 more years, I don't know what to say. But when I talk about comparing racism to poop, another analogy I did was about littering. I don't litter. I teach my kids not to litter. They don't litter either. But that does not mean that we shouldn't volunteer to clean up beaches or go to the forest and clean up the forest, because there are systems in place that litter and destroy the forest and destroy the beaches with filth and chemicals and garbage. So just because you don't do it doesn't mean you should sit on the sidelines. It's not enough to just not be racist. You have to be actively anti-racist. You need to call people out on things. You need to educate yourself. You need to listen to people. And we need to open up our horizons and check out, read different books and look at different movies and listen to different music and listen to different people and understand that we are in this together. And so I appreciate you listening to me, because this for me is really the thing I feel most joyous about, is to spread, also just have a discussion. So if you have any questions, please, let's get on to it. And this is just some of the books that I encourage people to check out. But I also have a list of books and podcasts and articles and all these different things that you can look at. And I can send it to the folks who are running this, or you could write to me directly. But yeah, so why don't I shut this down right now? And oh yeah, and go to Patreon if you want to follow me. Boom. Okay. Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, the best thing to do is, Molly, if you're hosting it, or John, is to look at the questions and then just ask me, because I'll look at them and then I'll just read them all, and I'll be all over the place.
Great. Well, then I'll get started, Keith, with one of our questions has gotten a bunch of upvotes. Have you considered writing a graphic novel, nonfiction, on the history of policing in America? Because I think maybe we'd like to see that.
No, but I know some folks who are doing that. And I'm working on a graphic novel about my time as a Michael Jackson impersonator in high school. And it's long and it's hard and it's very drawn out, and I've been doing it forever because the show sort of happened while I was working on it. But there have been requests for me to sort of do a graphic novel of this slideshow and go take a deeper dive on some of the stuff that I talk on. And I wouldn't mind doing that, but I think I want to do something that is a combination of illustration and written word, because it's just the grind. The reason why I do just one-page comics and short comics is because I like things to end. I like finishing things. I was just talking about that the other day. Waiting for Star Wars, waiting for The Empire Strikes Back when I was a kid was torture to me. And so I would rather just boom, 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 boom. That's why I like, having our series, like everything drops and you can just watch it 20 minutes, 25 minutes, then watch another one, just watch another one. But it's too much. Graphic novels are a lot.
Well, we have another question about format. Given the uneasy relationship between traditional newspapers and political cartoons of late, what do you think is the role of online outlets like the Nib that are focused entirely on comics journalism, especially in allowing marginalized voices to be heard?
Oh, the Nib is great. It's what I think the Nib is being copied or emulated by other places. But I think the Nib is a great business model. And if Matt Boris has done a really good job at cultivating a new generation of political and editorial cartoonists, and who are doing it in all different types of formats and doing journalism and everything. So I think the Nib is really important, and I appreciate what they're doing.
A related question, somebody asked, do you think artists are at risk of being jailed for dissent in the future?
Oh, there are artists being jailed and run out of their countries, like a bunch of places all over the world. One of the coolest things that the AAEC does is recognize an editorial cartoonist every year from somewhere around the world for the work that they're doing. And some horrible thing has happened to them because of the work that they're doing. They're either jailed or sent, a hit is put on them, so they're run out of the country. We are not quite there yet, but I worry for this country, and just like for what, like the way the way everything is just becoming, just a bunch of outlets being bought by like one guy, and then just all this sort of, it's just this propaganda. If I had the opportunity, if I had the druthers, I would break up all this stuff and go back to the time, Reagan's the one who got rid of all these regulations, but, take it back to a time where you couldn't own all these radio stations, you couldn't own all these newspapers, you couldn't own all these TV stations and have them all individual businesses. Like, that's how you create jobs. That's how you create diversity and diversity of opinion. And we're just, the way we like allow 20 people to run this country with just so much money. I did a strip about just, if we took the top 20, first of all, no one should have $1 billion. Nobody should have $1 billion. I think someone put it in a post. If you make $1 billion, we should just name a park after you and say you beat capitalism. And that's it. Like, you shouldn't earn any more money. The fact that anybody has $100 billion is insane. And if we just took the top 20 billionaires and just took half their money, their lives and generations on will never change. If someone has 20 billion and you took 10 billion from them, nothing would change. And that 10 billion would actually go and help people. So, and I know that's either communism or that's whatever, but the government created these laws that allows them to have 11 or 20 billion dollars, so they can make laws to take half that 20 billion. Any more questions?
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, something will happen to that 10 billion. It's going to make a lot of interest.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, when you have that much money, you don't have to do anything. It'll continue. Our laws are designed to keep mega rich people extremely rich. That's all this system is designed to do. It's not, the whole American dream thing is like a big sham. Like, they make it so like you can get a house and a picket fence and this and that, but even that's just about gone. The for a person to jump classes is like virtually impossible unless you're inheriting all this money. And that's, there's a certain amount of folks that have that, can inherit money, but I didn't inherit any money.
Well, we're almost out of time. We're going to take this to about maybe a couple minutes past 8:30, just because we've got lots of questions lined up and we don't want to miss them all. Related to what you've just been talking about, one of our audience members asked, what do you feel about reparations? I would love better schools, better education, better healthcare, et cetera. I've heard so much about give us a check, but I don't think that will work. So what do you think?
Well, yeah, white people won't tolerate that. But I will say this. I heard someone make a real good argument about reparations, just saying, like, why don't you just give baby bonds? So why don't we look at the wealth of families all across the country, and you give them the amount of baby bonds. If a family is poor, then you give each child like a $50,000 baby bond. If it's like Bill Gates's kid, you give them like a $50 baby bond. Like you do it, and here's the thing that's going to play out. If you just do it by the wealth of the family, then essentially, Black families will get theirs, but it has to be under the guise. It can't be a race thing, because white people will get all bent out of shape, even though it's always been about race. Always. If you give me any subject, I can tell you about anything, and it has to do with race, whether it's medicine, whether it's real estate, whether it's sports, whether it's liquor. There's a story about horrible race craziness about hockey. The modern hockey game was invented by the grandkids of slaves who escaped the United States and went to Canada. Black people invented the slap shot, and we don't. This is the type of stuff that you'll never learn anywhere. You won't even learn it from the NHL. Actually, there's a Soul on Ice thing that talks a little bit about it, but there's so much that we don't teach that should be taught, because it's just a matter of pride. It's a matter of I've heard so many, what's that guy, Steve King, the moron politician, is like, oh, well, Europeans have done everything. We're the ones who've done everything. That's because that's the education you get. And if people just got a well-rounded education, then you'd know that that's not the case. The first thing you should do is read People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. First 10 pages will explain to you, in his own words, Christopher Columbus will explain to you why he doesn't deserve a holiday. He'll explain it in his own words. Next question.
Okay, so one question is, are you finding that white response to your cartoons has changed since the widespread BLM protests this summer?
No, I mean, I think a lot of people have been following me for a long time, and there's been a lot of white people who are like, oh my goodness, like the world is just catching up to what you've been saying for the past 28 years. And when people say the show is just, the timing is so perfect. And I just say, well, it's about something that happened to me 20 years ago. And the show would be perfectly on time at any time, because racism is evergreen. I've said this before, police brutality is evergreen. I just know from doing my slideshow from the past 5-6 years. At first, whenever I talked about white supremacy or white privilege, white people were like, oh no, what are you talking about? Oh, and reparations, oh no, oh curse. But like people are starting to understand the idea of it and why, people need to understand that this isn't, I got mine, so no one should have anything. No one else should have anything. We homeschool our kids here where we live. And this area has really high property values. So for the schools, I mean, really high property taxes for the schools. So we pay all this money, extra money to fund the schools. And people have said to me like, so why do you live in this area if you don't use the schools? And I just sit there and go, why wouldn't I want people in my neighborhood and community to be well educated? Like, why wouldn't I want my money, my tax money, to go to that? It's better that everybody has a great education, and that way they won't come and rob my house, like just because they're desperate. Like, we have to understand, and I think a little bit we're starting to learn our lesson with COVID, which is like, it's in our best interest that our neighbors are as healthy as we are. Like, it's in our best interest that we are all doing well, not just a few of us. And if you think that's socialism, know what socialism? Libraries are socialism, and they're wonderful places. So if you get a problem with that, then you get a problem with libraries, and I don't want to talk to you. Next question.
Well, I mean, I think we should almost end on that, but there's one more, just a comment from someone in the audience who said, not a question, just want to say that you've made me laugh, cry, and be inspired by your talk. As a Black man, I love what you're doing to educate people of all ages and walks of lives. Keep educating and spreading the knowledge and joy. And I think that we all feel some variation on that. I hope. It was a really inspiring talk. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Keith. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, I wish I could be there again. Like, I'm sure that like the Mojo in Charlottesville, again, we go up there for our dentist, but it's yeah, it's an interesting, when stuff went down in Charlottesville, was it 2 years ago now? Or was it 2 years ago or a year ago? I can't remember. I was in Germany when it happened, and my in-laws are just nodding their heads like, when you get Germans like nodding their heads, and there's so much I've learned being married to a German and hearing her. I learned that the Germans, the Nazis, came here to learn how to be Nazis. And they studied how the US treats its Black population and its immigrant population. And they took that back with them. And the problem with the Germans is they tried to do it all like in a decade, what America has done over 400 years. And so like there's so much. And I just remember when we were over there, there was an American that did a Zig Heil or whatever in a bar, and a German punched him out. And it was such a metaphor. It's a metaphor for what is happening here in America. And I honestly believe that there are more decent people here than horrible people, but the decent people need to step up. They can't just stand there and go, oh, wow, like this is really bad. Now, on the other hand, I know that there are people these past 4 years who are coming to the conclusion that like, maybe I am racist, and I don't have a problem with that. I think there are people coming to terms with that, and it's a sad, sad reality, but yeah, I think we're learning a lot about people, which is, good and bad, but at least you know where they stand.
Thank you.
All right, on that happy note.
On that happy note, thank you so much.
That's good.
You can't see our audience, but I think there are a lot of people applauding because these little things keep popping up, showing that people are putting little signs up in their profiles. So thank you so much. We're going to close out for the evening, and thank you everyone for coming. We will see you tomorrow at noon, 2, and 4 for the sessions. That's Eastern Time, noon, 2, and 4. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Good night.
Cheers.
Good night.
Bye.